Now I'm going to introduce our host for the evening, Stewart Yerton. He is our economy and business reporter, and tonight's event is part of the year-long series, Tourism's Tipping Point, that is supported by a grant from the Hawaii Community Foundation as part of its Change Framework project. You can check out Stewart's reporting on civilbeat.org. Okay, without further ado, Stewart Yerton.
Hi, everybody. Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming. It's great to have this really big crowd here of engaged citizens here to talk about really a critical issue facing the Kailua and the state as a whole, and that's the growth of tourism and the effect it's having on communities here. One of the ways we're going to go about this event tonight is a little different from what we've done in the past. We have a online poll that we'll be able to let people engage with. We'll pose questions. You can log in, and you can post your answer and your opinion. So we can get everyone's opinion who has a phone. You'll be able to log in, and we'll be able to see in real time how people feel about certain issues, again, related to tourism. So then we'll talk to the panelists, and they can weigh in as well. So much of what we're going to do tonight, we'll be looking at that. It looks like we have an answer already. People are weighing in. It's going back and forth. Excellent. Okay, so we'll see how it works. So we'll do this first question. I'll introduce the panelists as people are answering this, weighing in, and then we'll let the panelists address this question. But so you see the question. Now, we have a. Oh no, we'll have plenty of time. Don't worry. So while people weigh in, I'll introduce the panelists. So Terrence George is president and CEO of the Harold K.L. Castle Foundation. The foundation was established in 1962, and its current investments are focused on public education, redesign and enhancement, nearshore marine resource conservation, and strengthening the communities of Windward Oahu. Since its inception, the foundation has awarded over $200 million in grants, with more than $60 million going to organizations serving Windward Oahu. Currently, the foundation disperses an average of $6 million in grants per year. So we're really lucky to have Terry here. Thank you very much for making it. It's great to have you. We also have Danny Casler of My Kailua. So Danny runs a collection of media sites focusing on Kailua. His My Kailua Instagram site has more than 17,000 followers, which is a great number of followers, and is really like a small town newspaper with everything from pet pictures to accident reports and even things about new state laws affecting the community. So it really is like a small town community newspaper. If you haven't checked it out, check it out. It's got a lot of good information about the neighborhood. It's got some other stuff that's not as serious, but it's a nice mix of information. We also have Senator Laura Thielen. And Senator Thielen represents the 25th Senatorial District, which encompasses Kailua, Lanikai, Enchanted Lake, Keolu Hills, Maunawili, Waimanalo, Hawaii Kai, and all the way to Portlock. Oh, really? Yep. Is that right? Yep. Fascinating. Wow, so it's a big district. Okay. Senator Thielen grew up in Kailua and raised 2 children here. She's also a former chair of the Department of Land and Natural Resources for Hawaii. You served in that for 4 years? Just about 4 years, so a huge job, one of the biggest agencies, I think, in the state, maybe 1,000 employees? Or 700, okay, so huge job. And we also have Senator Jarrett Keohokalole. He's a proud 7th generation. a proud 7th-generation resident of the 24th Senate District, including Kaneohe and Kailua. In 2006, Senator Keohokalole received a bachelor's degree in journalism from the University of Hawaii at Manoa, and then he obtained a law degree from the William S. Richardson School of Law at the University of Hawaii in 2013, earning a certificate in Native Hawaiian law. Okay, yes, okay.
Sorry I didn't do this in the beginning. To participate in our polls, get your phones out and open your text messages. You don't need an app, you don't need to download anything. Just open your text messages. Now, the number you're gonna send the message to is 22333. So the phone number is 22333. And the message you're gonna send it is Civil Beat, CIVIL BEAT 714. And then press send, and you'll get a confirmation saying you're now participating in our poll. And then after that, you'll just need to send text A or B, depending on what your answer is. So anyone, the number is 22333. And the message you're sending it is Civil Beat 714. Send them a text message. And then just, if you still don't get in, just raise your hand. I'll come help you. Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Yeah. Thank you, Alana.
And you'll need to send A or B as your text message, depending on your answer. Okay.
Okay. So it looks like, I'm not sure things are changing a lot, but we can move on now and ask the panelists to weigh in on their opinion on this question. And really, I want to ask the question more broadly than simply has tourism brought more benefits or problems. If you could please, starting with Senator Thielen, weigh in on this general question, but through the lens of your experience here, how long you've been here, the changes you've seen, and benefits and problems brought by tourism.
How much time?
Take as much time as you want.
Okay, you all comfortable? So my family moved here when I was about 5 years old in the mid-1960s. And in that time, we had about 500,000 tourists a year to our state. Last year, we hit about 10 million tourists a year, just a smidgen under 10 million. But when people think about, in your lifetime, going from well under 1 million to 10 million, I think what that masks is what's happened in our world and in our state more recently. So from 1988 till about 2004, over a 15-year period, we were at 7 million tourists, 6 million to 7 million, slowly creeping up from 6 million to 7 million. Starting in 2005, we jumped into 8 million and started moving up a little bit more. But really what happened in 2010, when the internet platforms opened up, we no longer had a cap on visitors by the number of hotel rooms we had or the number of condotels we had. All of a sudden, anybody could open up a room for visitors. And people are on all sides of the vacation rental issue, but there's no question that it allowed the jump from 8 million visitors to 10 million visitors. And what's happened from 2010 to today, we increase on average to 500 to 600,000 visitors a year, a little over 500,000 visitors a year. So while we talk about 10 million visitors a year now, what we have to realize is that this year, we're going to be at about 10.5 or more million. Next year, we'll be at 11 million plus. And by 2020, we'll probably be at 12 million visitors a year. There's no question that tourism has brought a lot of economic benefits to Hawaii, but it's also brought a tremendous amount of costs. And there's a question about whether the economic benefits are of a sufficient value for the cost. And by that, I mean a lot of our tourism jobs are low-paying jobs. They're service industry. And it's transitioning from union jobs that came with benefits to independent contractor jobs that don't come with benefits. And so we're seeing just the pace of change increase really rapidly in our society. It's one of the reasons why I ran for office 7 years ago, is I felt that a lot of our policymakers were not taking this seriously. Kailua is kind of a canary in the coal mine. Just the changes that we've had to undergo, people are starting to take it seriously now, but not enough of them are. And often, the steps that the ones who are taking it seriously are able to take are too incremental. So that's my position, and I'm glad Civil Beat's having this discussion, and I look forward to hearing some more from others.
Danny, next.
Okay. First, I just want to say that I'm really grateful and I'm honored to be here to speak with you guys, and look forward to meeting you guys. Thank you, Stewart and Civil Beat, for choosing me. As I said this before, and I mean this really humbly, I feel there are better candidates that could have spoke, but I'm honored to be here, so thank you. I think that number is pretty staggering, and I would say that's the general consensus that I feel across my platforms. We do have 17,000 people on the Instagram, and on the Facebook, we're about 49,000, so collectively, we've got more followers than our residents now. I remember when in 2012 we had 38,000 followers or 38,000 residents, and now we're at 55, and we continue to grow. And I wonder how are we fitting that many people in such a small town when there's not enough housing? So where are these people living? And I think we've seen a lot of uptick in crime. I've had people tell me it's always been there, but I don't think it's been there like we've seen it. I think we're seeing it more because the obvious is that we've got telephones that have cameras and videos now. It's kind of like, are there more sharks in the ocean? Probably less because they're being poached, but we see them more because there's a lot more GoPros, so it's just kind of the obvious. But I look at that number and I'm just kind of shocked, but I'm not surprised. I know that's how many of you guys feel. So I think my simple question is that it benefits those who benefit financially from it. And those who don't benefit from it, it's a detriment and it creates problems. Crowded streets, infrastructure. As I was telling Stewart and others that I just met, I remember walking into Dae Holiday Mart, Longs, and feeling like I just need one thing and I'm stuck there for an hour because I run into all these people that I love and I care about. And now when I walk into those places, I'm like, just get me out of here because I don't know anybody anymore. And that breaks my heart. It's sad, but right there, that tells exactly the consensus that I get on my platform and in this room. It's surprising.
Thanks. Senator Keohokalole, do you see benefits, problems, both? Can you talk a little bit about your experience?
Yeah, so I remember going to Andy's Drive-In and getting a short stack with my dad back in 1987. And so all I can, like those memories of Kailua were of this sleepy little town that was a small, like nice place to live. And I remember my family, we moved back to Kaneohe right after the flood. A lot of you folks have heard my flood story. And I remember thinking Kaneohe was a big town, you know? And the one thing that I just keep seeing all the time is this, or I keep feeling all the time is just how crowded it is. Just how crowded it is on the windward side in particular. It's crowded in town, but it kind of always has been. And now it's worse, but that's town. You know, it just is. You know.
We signed up for that over there, right?
Well, yeah, exactly. You know, you have access and you have mobility and you have density in town. And over here you had different access and different mobility and different density. You had community. And it does feel like I can't get a hamburger at Teddy's on a Saturday with my kids because I'll have to stand in line for an hour and they'll go nuts. And so that's frustrating because the Kailua that a lot of people remember seems like it's just not there anymore. And when did that all happen? And how did it happen? And what are we supposed to do about it? So, and that's the real challenge, is now that we have the reality in front of us, how do we adapt to it?
Yeah, we'll like to talk a little bit about that in the next question. So, Terry.
So first disclosure, I grew up in Hawaii Kai, which thanks to the Ko'olau Hawaiian Civic Club, I learned was part of the Ahupua'a Waimanalo. So I'm barely in what should be your district, Senator Thielen. And I remember our office when I started working at the Harold Castle Foundation in 2003 was on Hikili Street. And if I got, the kids dropped off early and could come in early, I could sneak into a booth at Boots and Kimos, and there wasn't a line. And I have seen the changes. I will say that I think it's important to unpack the question a little bit. So I think pre-vacation rental boom, pre-Airbnb, pre-VRBO, we might have a different kind of an answer to this than we have now. But it is the big elephant in the room that we have to address. And we finally have, you'll probably talk about it later, but we have a new law and we need it to be enforced so that we can begin to manage this. I will say, growing up as a kid, I would go to Hanauma Bay, and it was completely open, could sleep overnight. I could see manta ray there. And then all of a sudden, the nature of tourism changed because people actually rented cars, and then they could drive. And then they discovered this place, and before you knew it, there were 3 million people there. And they're in a slick of sunscreen that we now sometimes see right here in Kailua Bay as well. They had to take action, and they learned to manage it. But there are some people that I need to bring into the room who might answer this question differently. Number one, I know many of you got in the mail a survey from A&B, to whom Harold Casa Foundation sold its remaining commercial retail properties. And they, like us before that in Kaneohe Ranch, decided to ask people what they thought of issues. So they sent a survey to all 16,000 households, and they got a pretty good response rate back. And they had an interesting response to sort of this kind of question. And I asked them what it was, and they said 5 in 8 respondents indicated that tourism has had a negative impact on their household's overall quality of life. But I guess a little more nuanced. 47% of residents agree that tourism is necessary for the success of local merchants. And 85% of folks said they like doing business with local merchants. I did my own survey of a couple local merchants yesterday and today to ask them about this. I just asked them what percentage, just at the counter of Lanikai Juice and Morning Brew, what percentage of your folks coming there are tourists, do you think? And Lanikai Juice, it was at least 50%, if not more. Morning Brew was slightly less than 50% now, but it spikes in the wintertime to more than that. And then I happened to run into somebody from Sand People at the Kailua Chamber of Commerce today, and they said it's about half too. So I think about the people who bag our groceries at Foodland, who are there at the counter at our coffee shops, and I wonder how they would answer that question.
Yeah, I can say that I did a similar survey, walked around quite a bit, and that's what I heard. About 50 people said they maybe had 50% of their customers were tourists, but the other question that I followed up with was, well, how many of those do you think are staying in short-term vacation rentals? And that was not quite they didn't think 50% were. And the thought was that eliminating the short-term vacation rentals would have an effect, but not a dire effect. And again, that included the person from Sand People as well. He said he didn't know, but he said it would have an effect, but wasn't sure how much. But so another question that I wanted to ask is something that I think a lot of folks here might connect with. And again, it has to do with government and whether government is responsive to your concerns. And there's talk here of seceding from the city and county of Honolulu, or creating some other political subdivision that can be more responsive to your concerns. So the question is, what can be done? And do you think Senator Thielen, who's a senator with a law degree and very knowledgeable about government. Do you think something can be done to create better, smaller political subdivisions that would be more responsive to people?
You know, Hawaii is pretty unique in that we have very concentrated and centralized power. So I think we're the only state in the United States that has a state government and only 4 counties. In most other jurisdictions on the mainland, you know, a place like Kailua, Hawaii Kai, others would have their own form of governance. I know there was some talk from some folks about, you know, maybe Kailua needs to secede. And when I was listening to the reaction to that, I think the emotion behind it is that the city isn't paying attention to what's going on in the communities out in the country areas outside of urban Honolulu. And so, like, for instance, when we've had this growth of tourism and they're hitting Kailua, they're hitting the North Shore just in huge amounts, we're not getting the reaction. We're not getting the infrastructure upgrades to deal with the volume of people. We're not getting the legislation. We're not getting the enforcement of the laws and things like that. It's just left to happen. I don't know what the answer is, but I know that there's a lot of communities besides Kailua that are really hungry for having some greater local say in the decisions that are made in their communities. We just went through a long planning process in Waimanalo over a year-long period a couple years ago. And I still remember sitting in the room at the end with people from the health center as well as other folks in the community. And some of them were saying passionately, you know, community health is tied to an ability to have some form of self-governance. And we need to find a way, in my opinion, just because we can't rely on Honolulu to be able to, you know, be there for each of the communities. And we have the strengths in our communities to be able to make some of these decisions.
Senator Keohokalole, what do you think? This seems like maybe a law school exam question that somebody might throw at you, right? Like, and I should say
I wasn't good at those. That's why I ran for office. So I've gotten into a couple of these discussions with my neighbor island colleagues because one of the things I learned when I got into office and got myself into trouble a couple of times at the legislature is there is a real dynamic between Oahu and the neighbor islands. There's a feeling on the neighbor islands that Oahu dictates without listening, and that we think we're superior to people on the neighbor islands. And growing up in Kaneohe and Kailua, and you know, we didn't want for anything, but we didn't travel. You know, so I went to Maui one time when I was a kid, and I went to the Big Island, I think, for a funeral. I just haven't been to the neighbor islands. It didn't strike me at all that was what was being perceived on the neighbor islands. And I don't think in general people on Oahu think they're better than people on the neighbor islands. They're just so busy stuck in traffic. They just have to focus on what's going on. So one of the things I told them is, you know, actually, the thing about Oahu that maybe people from the neighbor islands don't understand is that it's 4 islands. It's the west side, it's Honolulu, it's the windward side, and it's central. And the reason I can tell you it's 4 islands is I have family in Waianae that never come to Kaneohe except for baby luau's and weddings. That's why they go to the neighbor islands, right? So you kind of naturally have that already. And I think Laura's right. There is this, I think in general, the state government is too centralized. And I've said this before, part of that is because our government structure is designed for a Hawaii that no longer exists. It's designed for a plantation economy of the late 50s when we had 400,000 people and 5 sugar companies. And we have a whole lot more going on now, and these systems are not designed to deal with these pressures. And we need to really start taking a look at that. And so some of these things pop up naturally because we're a free market society to a certain extent. And things are happening before we even realize they've happened. And then adjusting with these antiquated systems are making it worse and are making it more challenging.
So moving on from a sort of wonky government question to this broad question, again, one of our poll questions that people are answering. Do you believe Kailua is being managed for tourism at the expense of local people? And this is a question that we framed sort of after a question that the Hawaii Tourism Authority asked to in its statewide resident sentiment survey of tourism. So they asked this very similar question, and they got a slightly different response. It actually was a lot different. But has everyone had a chance to weigh in on this? Do we need more time, and then we can have the panelists address it, and we can maybe start with Terry. Your take on this. And I will tell you, in the statewide sentiment survey, it was about 66% said they believed their island was being managed for tourists at the expense of local people. So, and that's been very alarming for the Tourism Authority, because that it used to be maybe 50% believe that. It's up to 66% statewide. So what do you think, Terry?
Well, I feel like I'm kind of one of the iconoclasts in the room. If it's being managed for tourists, it sure isn't being managed very well right now. We have all of these problems. I have an opportunity to go to other communities. I just recently went to Hobart, Tasmania, which is an incredibly cool part of the world, 40 degrees south. Hobart is a main city. Tourism is booming. And you know why it's booming? Because this crazy billionaire built this amazing modern art museum that everybody from the mainland of Australia wants to come over and see. Hobart's about the same size population-wise as Kailua. They have invested heavily by using bond financing in a great beautification of their coastal area. They've invested very heavily in their version of a community college. They are facing huge housing problems because they're their own Airbnb. But there were no homeless people that I saw. Everybody had a job. I don't know whether it was a good job or not. The economy was doing well. It was being managed. So if it's being managed for tourists, I'm not sure it's being managed that well.
Senator? Yeah.
I don't think it's being managed for tourists. I think it's just the existing system that has been, that was created for the plantation economy that we've had a couple generations ago. And we've just been sort of meandering around the edges whenever there's a crisis or whenever there's enough of an impetus for us to make change. So a lot of these systems, for example, the DLNR, are underfunded, difficult to drive money to, and difficult to restructure in a systemic way. And so you have the forestry division or the wildlife program that are short a manager, the supervisors 2 years from retirement, and the whole thing's being held together. The whole system is being held together by duct tape and chewing gum and the lady who's been there for 25 years that remembers where everything is. And so it's not that there's some cabal that are helping feed the evil hotels that are making all the money, and it's that the thing is barely being held together because it was designed for a tiny hunting community that were made up primarily of Hawaiians that were from there and plantation workers who would go on the weekends. And now we have to deal with tourists who go hike in the forested areas every day and access these trails that people just dug out, and were not regulated at all because hardly anybody was going there, So.
Okay. Yeah. Yes, Terry.
Just jump in on two quick things.
Yeah.
One is up to Senator Thielen. I mean, when you were the land board chair, you were rightly shocked at the underfunding of our trail system, and you actually tried to push the envelope and try to create ways in which we could actually charge visitors for parking at different places. And we need to do more of that, but you pioneered that.
Yeah. Well, you have some really good ideas.
There is some management there, and then the other thing is the way we used to manage tourism was to do tourism marketing. So a lot of the TAT dollars for that, everybody going to a hotel is charged, goes to the Hawaii Tourism Authority, which traditionally has been to go market Hawaii so that more and more people would come here. But they're beginning to shift that because they're beginning to see that though that tourism economy, our beautiful environment is good for the tourism economy, the economy is hurting our environment right now. It's hurting our trails, it's hurting our beaches, our water system, our sewer system. But the good news is, one of Mapuana de Silva's haumana, Kalani Ka'anaana, who's in the back over there, is actually a key person in helping to change the way Hawaii Tourism Authority spends its dollars. So they're actually beginning to invest in our natural and cultural resources. And we need to ideate and innovate some more the way Laura did when she was the land board chair. There are places that charge green fees that actually generate tons of income that we can plow back into paying for the damage that tourists do, improving our own civic life together. It's hard to do because we're not a standalone independent country, but it is still possible to experiment and innovate.
Well, thank you, Terry. That was my next question, so we don't have to ask that one again. Very good. Danny, what do you think? Manage for tourism at the expense of local people.
I would put, let me see if this works. Okay. I would 3 letters in between managed, and it would be MIS. It would be mismanaged. I gotta make sure I spelled that right. I did go to Kailua, so it's possible. It's possible I spelled that wrong. It's probably actually like, yeah, I mean, this makes a little funky. Sorry, buddy. I love that you want to champion that. I think we should be charging people to access the resources, and we should be looking at how to preserve that. So, yeah, as many sectors of not just Kailua, but our government are mismanaged. I think I was told, and I could be wrong, it was from my good friend Lisa Kate. She had told me that the money that's being collected from the landing permits from Mokulua Islands is not even staying here. So back to that question earlier, when there's that succeeding, what is the word, secession? See, Kalaheo again. My heart's in the right place. It got better. It wasn't too good when I was going there. Yeah, succession. So basically, is if we can't take care of our own town and the money's not even going there, then we're going to continue to have potholes, and I'm going to start posting pictures and giving potholes birthdays for every year that it stays there. You'll see it on my Kailua.
All right, good. All right, very good. So, yeah, Senator Thielen, I did want to ask you about this because I looked a little bit about the money and where things go, how the trails are funded. I mentioned in an article that ran today how you had, even as recently as last session, sought to get money earmarked for the trails. But one of the really difficult to figure out things is how exactly the trails get funded. And we know there's money that goes to the trail system, but it looks to me like, for instance, money, say, collected from Diamond Head, where they're getting 3,000 people a day, and you multiply that by $1 at least a day, and it would be a lot of money, goes into a fund, a special fund, and then that money is used for all kinds of things, is not just the trails. Is that right? Can you explain the sources of funding for the trails and why you need earmarked money for the trails?
Let me start with, I think, going to that question of management. I don't think we are managing tourism at all for the benefit of anybody. We don't have anybody who's responsible for managing. We have some entities that are responsible for managing pieces of areas that tourists go to. We have a Hawaii Tourism Authority, which gets a significant amount of the hotel tourism tax every year, but their primary mission has been marketing to increase tourism. We have a new director now who is trying to talk about the responsibility to manage and to work with partners on it. But I think I wouldn't go so far as what Terry has said, is that the agency has turned the corner. I think there's good people in the agency who support that, but we'll see whether the industry comes around to it. When you take a look at the marketing materials, almost every picture, it's just this beautiful landscape without anybody in it. Or maybe just a couple people in it. And we've just been so blessed in these islands that are so amazingly beautiful, and we haven't taken care of it at all to the degree we need to. So the Department of Land and Natural Resources, which is responsible for managing our state parks, which are the sites with our most important cultural historic resources, as well as some of the most iconic, beautiful areas, has a budget of, I think, under $10 million a year. Now, contrast the city and county parks of Honolulu, I think their budget is probably 50, 60 million a year. Diamond Head Monument is part of a state park.
Right.
So that's the special fund money that goes to state parks. The 10 million a year, or whatever it is that Parks has right now, I'm a little out of date, a lot of that is money from fees because the legislature cut the general funds. We have trails with over 800 miles of trails statewide. The budget is less than $2 million, and it's been pretty much flat for 20 years. Boating and ocean recreation, we all want them out in the ocean, somehow managing the ocean recreation, but they're kind of stuck with these small boat harbors and, trying to spend their money managing that and not getting out into the ocean where we have this conflict between, recreational residents and fisheries and commercial. The money in the state budget is complicated, but the bottom line is the entire Department of Land and Natural Resources has about 1% of the state budget, but that also goes towards like the Bureau of Conveyances, things that have nothing to do with natural resource management. So it's up to us to figure out the how. I just think what is important for people to do is to say to the legislature, it's not enough. We need management. We've been lazy and relying on, the bounty of and the beauty of the nature here, and we're killing it. We got to take care of it.
It sounds like that would be a popular idea among people here. And are you going to introduce based on that? So we'll follow it next session. If you introduce something again, we can follow up on this. It's needed. And Terry's idea, they're doing a lot looking at green fees, some really sophisticated work that I know they're doing over there. We were going to ask about it, but we'll move on to another question and one of the poll questions. But just to let you know, we do want to return to this, and it sounds like a lot of people clapped on that idea too, some kind of fees for users so we can get a little funding to help manage these areas. And again, Terry's group is doing some amazing stuff on this, really high, really in-depth. Yes. I'm sorry, what was that, Cynthia? Rescues, yes. Well, that's another issue. But so the next question, we're going to skip ahead to something. We don't want to have an 8-hour meeting like we did at the city council multiple times on this. But do you believe short-term vacation rentals have been a net benefit to Kailua? So, yeah, let's move on. All right, well, it looks like... Okay, should we, maybe we should move. Oh, wait. So we have people weighing in. Yeah. So, no. We have iconoclasts like Terry. Nothing. Okay, so to play the devil's advocate, we have people who want to come here and they want an alternative. And they're coming here, they're spending money, they're helping the economy, maybe they're helping create jobs. They're doing all of these things that we heard about during the city council meetings, and it's all true to an extent. What about this? Isn't that true, Senator Thielen?
I think if from the perspective of the individual operating a vacation rental, it's a benefit. because that individual can make 2 to 3 times as much money on income from a short-term rental than they can from a long-term rental. But zoning about what's a permissible use in different areas takes a look at it from the community perspective. And, I think this issue's been talked about a lot. Everybody knows the pros and cons to it about the impacts on the communities, but I guess rather than just rehashing that, because my position's been pretty clear, for those that do support vacation rentals in the community, the big question would be, where does it end? If we're going to be at 11 million tourists this year, 12 million tourists in 2020, if China ever opens up and allows more of their residents to travel, the country that has the largest amount of savings and a population of 1.4 billion people, that have more people in the middle class than the entire population of the United States, we're going to see jumps in tourism 5-10 years down the line. Where does it end? Is anybody gone to Venice or talked to people from Venice or taken a look at those pictures where the entire communities have been hollowed out? And in the morning, you see the ferries coming over from the mainland where all the workers live, where they get dropped off to go work in the hotels. Where do our people live? Right. We don't control our borders. We're not a nation. So we got to figure out, we can't look at it from the perspective of the individual. We've got to look at it from the perspective of the island and the communities. And we can't just let it be a free market. And it never was. It's just that the zoning wasn't enforced.
Okay.
And
Okay. Yeah. Just let me. I want to move on to another question about disruptive technology that's directed to you, Danny, along the same lines, similar but different. And this is a next poll question. Has the influence of social media had a positive or negative impact on the community of Kailua? Because one of the things we often hear is that social media is what's advertising places and bringing people to places they've never been before, Maunawili Falls and the Pillbox Trail and the Kailua Beach, and everybody wants a picture with the Mokes in the background now. It's like Diamond Head. It's almost the icon of Hawaii beaches. What do you think? Is it positive, net negative? What do you think?
Well, first I want to say I feel this mic is really rough. First I want to say I feel like you're in my head, Laura. Like, it's crazy because you're saying pretty much everything I would say. I wanted to also add to that and say I've got some mutual friends that own vacation rentals, illegal vacation rentals in Kailua. One of them was making $65,000, $75,000 a year off his vacation rental, quit his job. I have a friend in Lanikai whose family has an 80% occupancy, and that rents out for anywhere from $800 to $1,200 a night. So do the math, guys. It absolutely benefits the people that financially benefit from it, but at the end of the day, does it benefit the community? It's really easy when you own one, and then I get taken back as well because I want to see my friends' older families not have to leave Kailua. I want to see them be able to do an in-home bed and breakfast or an on-property bed and breakfast where they can take care of their families. And I know that me and Don differ. Don Bremer from Keep It Kailua, we differ on that opinion because he's just like all or nothing, and I respect that. But at the same time, if you gave me the choice to keep my friends' families here in Kailua, I would definitely want that. But the whole home rental thing, not for it. So with this, the influence of social media, I get asked on occasion, do you feel like my Kailua has made Kailua worse? Well, there's a beautiful thing called analytics and data, and it shows that 95% of my followers are from Kailua, of Kailua, have family members in Kailua. So I'm not a part of that social media engine that drives tourism to Kailua. I will say that people do share the beautiful photos of that, and I'm sure that gets seen. But I know that there's other entities that are spending a lot of money. We don't spend any money to promote or market Kailua. In fact, I would say that a lot of people that are not from here come to the page and feel a little disenfranchised when they see the sentiment. So they don't naturally feel like, wow, this is a comfy, cozy social media place for me to be on my Kailua. It actually feels like, whoa, I don't know if I really belong on this page, because it's not really telling me to come here. It's telling me that if you do come here, then you need to follow by some code, which is a little unsaid, but it's stuff that like I was raised with when I was younger and in elementary school. And I think a lot of that is lost. And that's because, and I've said this before, when you took the kupuna out of the school that used to teach kids like me when I was younger, we were raised with codes of ethic. Right. And we understood principles, and those things are gone. So now you're just bringing in new people that just don't understand those things. So things are going to change.
Senator Keohokalole, do you see this social media as something good for you to be able to use to stay in touch with what people feel from the community? You know, what is it good? Is social media as a elected official, is it something that helps you stay in touch? Is it good for the community? Is it good for you?
So quite frankly, this popped in my head. I have to say it now.
Yeah.
It's a pain in the butt for me.
Well,
because I have to. I feel like I have to engage. And here's the reason why. When I ran for office, I sent out a lot of mail. Why? Because voters in my district open the mail. What kind of people open the mail? Older people over 40. People under 40, they might look at it and then it's in the trash, right? But whereas my parents, my wife's grandmother, she'd sit down every day. Once I was knocking on doors, I thought a lady came out to the sidewalk to see me. It's because she knew the mail truck was coming down behind me, because he comes every day at the same time. I can't talk to folks under 40 unless I engage them in social media. Wow. Unless I'm on Instagram, I don't know what people are saying. I've gotten scoldings from individuals who are going, you see what's on social media, what they're saying about you? And, that means I got to go and check it. But I think that
sounds like a positive impact in a way.
Well, so that's what I mean. So my answer to that is I don't know if it's a positive or a negative. I think social media is like money. It makes people more of who they are. And so we get all of the negative from it. We get lots of the positive. We get all of the connection. We get connection in a way that people really yearn for and desire. Yeah. I'm on the Kaneohe one too. You're from Kaneohe, and it's just dozens and dozens of people who used to live in Kaneohe and now live elsewhere, looking at old photos and commenting about how wonderful it was. My wife posted on there about the food court at Windward Mall back when they had Cinnabon, and the thing got like 140 comments. So what my general feeling on technology, and I'm the chair of technology, I'm trying to figure out a lot of these difficult issues, is I don't like to fight the tide on technology. But I do think there should be a responsible way and a reasonable protocol in how we deal with it. And so I'm actually satisfied with the way we finally got the vacation rental issue to proceed, because we've been fighting for the last couple of years that on the fact that the state should not take the lead on this. From a tax revenue perspective, we should let the counties figure out how to do their enforcement first. And then we can have the difficult conversations about bed and breakfast, about whether the world has changed and whether we can manage that responsibly. But from a policy perspective, I just didn't think it was good public policy for the state to come over the top and take a position when you had individual counties that were still working it out. And I just have to say, Laura took I voted no, and I've been voting no, but it's a different thing when you got to get up and lead the effort at personal cost. And Laura did that. And I hope you guys understand that, because it's not an easy thing to go over there and fight on these divisive issues.
Terry, any thoughts, social media, from your perspective?
I want to bring Kumuhulu Mapuana de Silva into the room a little bit, and just some of the things that she taught me about this place, and how to be a good steward, how to use the power and authority I do have in the role that I'm blessed to play at the Harold Casa Foundation. She taught me that we are in relationship with each other. We are all one great big ohana. we need to use our modes of communication to listen as much to speak. There's a danger with social media, but also other forms of communication, where it's relatively easy to use it to say what's wrong and who's to blame for it, to stoke fear and hate. But the civic muscle to stop something or blame somebody for what's wrong is a cruder muscle than the civic muscle to fix something, to lean in together in relationship as an ohana and listen to each other and then work really hard to forge a solution. Go read the book, The History of Kailua, and read the legend of the boy with a makale branch. It'll tell you an awful lot about the area right around here and how this community has actually learned to thrive over the centuries by people listening to each other, expressing and working on a shared purpose to solve a problem. And in this case, it was what to do when there was a famine and how to move from a time of famine to a time of Aina Momona, the fat land. So it's a broader comment, but we need to be very careful when we use social media about our own community to be respectful and listen and learn and commit to making this a better community together.
Thank you. So, thanks so much. So we want to take questions now, and I think that Alana and the other staff have been handing out question cards and letting you fill them out. We want to take some of those. We're just going to... Great. We have a bunch, and we'll try to... Yeah, sure. Okay, now the other thing is we have a few more poll questions, and we can keep just putting them up there from time to time if people like it. If you want to clap if you like it, we can ask a few more. Okay, it sounds like enough people like it that we'll pose a few, and maybe we can, as we ask these, we'll put the last few that we have up there. They're more general questions about your feelings about Kailua and your outlook for the future. So we'll do those. So here's a question. What can be done to accelerate the pace of street redesign among state and county leadership? How much support is there really for this? And I'm not sure what street redesign means, if it means things like bike lanes and other things, which I know are an issue out here. But how generally, street redesign, how quickly can it be done? Any thoughts, Senator Thielen?
I'm going to guess that having to do with the design because of the traffic and the bicycles, because our streets haven't really changed in Kailua since I was 5. My mom was one of the people that got the bike lane put into Lanikai, one of the moms there that was really active, which was great. And they went down to city council and demanded action. And maybe it's going to take the same thing now. But the streets, the state deals with the highways. So we have at the state level, the Pali coming into Kailua and Kamehameha Highway going into Waimanalo. The rest of the streets are all city and county. And I think while I disagree with the mayor on many topics, I think that they have done some innovative things on streets. And many of you may remember when Mike Formby was the director for DTS. Yeah. And that was great, but I'm not as familiar with the workings of the city and what it would take to speed that up. Frankly, I don't know, but we need it.
Yeah. Any ideas, Danny, on how this?
Not my
done?
wheelhouse.
Okay, Senator, any?
So I'm not sure that it can go a lot faster because a lot of what needs to happen is a community dialogue about why we should allow the design of our transportation networks to accommodate more things besides cars. I can't tell you how many people I've run into at the gym or at the grocery store who say, all these pedestrians, they need to watch where they're going. They need to, and I hesitate to get into it with every single person about that, but we have this love affair with our cars on Oahu in particular. And what I really want to tell a lot of those folks is the the vast overwhelming majority of the pedestrian accidents and fatalities we have are not kids darting out in the road staring at their phone. It's elderly people at dusk trying to get across the street. We just are in love with our cars and we're in too big of a hurry and not paying attention. And we need to provide better access for people who are electing to get out of their vehicles and move around. And so that's a conversation that some people don't want to hear because they're stuck in traffic so much. They want less. We're about to do complete streets in Kaneohe, and I'm already ready for the beating my ears are about to take, because we're gonna, people who just have never thought about biking or pedestrian access, because a car is a mode of freedom. And a sign of, like your own personal credibility and validity on this side, because you can't go to town very effectively unless you have a vehicle and mobility. So there's a social dynamic that is underway that needs to be exercised. And we do need to have those conversations in a proper forum so everybody can kind of get on the same page about it.
Terry, any thoughts on streets? Okay, here's a great question. Where are reps from A&B and Hawaii Tourism Authority? And we did ask A&B. They couldn't. They didn't have anybody who they could get to come here. I'm sorry.
I can answer that a little bit.
Okay, yeah, please. Yeah.
The one thing I did want to say is that when people were making offers to purchase the remaining property that Harold Castle had owned and gave to the Harold Castle Foundation. So basically what he did, he started the foundation in 1962. He took the map of what he owned and he said, okay, this is going to go to my heirs. That's going to be Kaneohe Ranch. And this is going to go to the community for the community benefit. And that's the Harold Castle Foundation. So we turned your guys' lease rent when you didn't own the land, we turned that into cash and we invested that in the market. We still retained commercial retail until A&B came. And I personally was pleased that they were the ones who had the strongest bid, because they are a local Kama'aina firm, and they had just made a strategic decision to actually pull back from their holdings anywhere else, and they're making a long-term big bet in Hawaii. So I think we could have gotten a lot worse owner than we have now. I'm not going to speak to what they've been doing, but at least they are a known entity.
Right. Well, I think the question was, where are they at
Right now,
on the forum? Yeah. And we tried. I think that was the question, and we couldn't. They didn't want to come. It does say Hawaii Tourism, or they couldn't make it. They regretted that they couldn't bring anybody who could attend. Hawaii Tourism Authority. We discussed bringing people from the Tourism Authority, from the Hotel Association, that sort of thing. The concern was it might turn into another Airbnb debate or something like that, and we know that people have had enough, a lot of people have had enough discussion about that. So that's the answer for that. Here is another question. Moving on, why can't we make Lanikai Beach and Mokalua's and make it like Hanama Bay? Fees and caps or something like that. Why don't we manage all of our recreation assets like the national parks? And this is a great question. Toby Morris, I think. And maybe, Terry, you can answer that a little bit. And Senator Thielen, who's been the DLNR chair. I know that, Terry, you guys are looking at these fees and other things.
Yeah. Actually, I want to mention I ran into John Fody. Anybody know John Fody? At the Y last week, and he was traveling, but he told me that he and a couple of his buddies have been actually looking at a local app that they think they could create a geofence around particularly important cultural and public areas. And somehow when you drive there, you have to turn around, otherwise you would get charged some dollars. Also, the app would allow you to say, okay, this is not called the Pillbox Trail. This is not called Lanikai. It's called Ka'ohao. Here are some legends and stories about it. So there is some interesting local ideas around that. I think we need to think through the feasibility of some of this to make sure that these dollars are captured for the benefit of those very places that need to be protected and restored. But John's got some ideas. Go talk to him.
Yeah, we spoke to John. We talked to him about being here. He couldn't be here. He was traveling or something. But Senator Thielen, how is this possible? Is there a way to charge people for? You can charge for parking is an idea, and I think Cynthia might have had that idea.
Yeah.
No, not at all.
No.
I
Parking needs to be kept residential. It should not be commercial.
Okay.
Okay.
If you charge, now you're turning it into a commercial beach.
Okay. And then, in any case, how do you do that? Is there a way to manage this?
I guess the question that, do we need ways to find funding to actually manage the numbers of people that are in a place to be able to protect the place, to stop us from loving it to death, and to be able to manage, the cultural resources, the natural resources, the historic resources, many of which are really fragile. But what worries me a little about this national park model and too much on the fees, I think one of the things that makes Hawaii just such an amazing place, our first Chief Justice, law school named after him, and of course now I'm sitting here, Richardson, thank you. Early on, he was looking at a case of whether the hotels could stop residents from walking through the hotels to get to Waikiki Beach, because they were effectively creating a wall that walled people out from getting to the beach. And he said, in our Constitution, our state constitution, it protects cultural rights of gathering. And the right to your cultural practices include the right to access the place. And he wrote an opinion that gave us a unique law from any other state where we're not just Western property law. We have rights for practitioners to access our ocean. We have rights of practitioners to access our mountain areas. We have rights to gather and collect resources, to practice traditional practices. And one of the things I worry about on some of the models I hear about this gating is it changes that. And I don't think we want that cultural aspect of Hawaii changed.
Senator Keohokalole, you studied Native Hawaiian law. You're familiar with the case, and I don't remember the name. I know the case, but I can't remember the name.
Don't do this to me.
Okay. But the concept of the right to exclude Western property law principle being sort of superseded by the right to access to beaches, public trust doctrine, right to gather, practice cultural practices. How does that play into this idea that we do want to charge people, and who do we charge, and how do we manage all that?
So first of all, we don't have a good track record of acknowledging and allowing the rights of people to perpetuate their culture. There's a whole situation going on right now that's sort of a representation of that. And so the honest truth is, I don't know. You have these. So we have I hate to keep going back to Kaneohe, but I just went to a neighborhood meeting on Monday night up in the Hokulele subdivision of Haiku in Kaneohe related to the Stairway to Heaven. And you have a bunch of neighbors over there who I really understand, and they've told me what they're going through for the last 20 years. They have knuckleheads in greater intervals running through their yard at 4 a.m. to go and get a selfie on the top of the Haiku stairs at sunrise. But you also have a very organized and committed community of people who remember when they could access that area and believe that it's their right as members of this community to be able to enjoy the benefits that we used to be able to just access, and there was no question about it, because there just weren't that many people over here that enjoy it. And the people that were here were part of a community and understood what the rules were and the right way to proceed. And you just have this clash between the onslaught of the world that's, found Hawaii and want to come here and access it. And I have never, I grew up in my grandmother's garage, who was a kupuna in the schools, and I don't remember ever feeling like there was a need for us to exclude outsiders. Like I never felt growing up or at any point that we really just didn't like the tourists. It's only recently, and it's because we're at this critical mass where they're just everywhere. And it's no longer the aloha that just normally comes out is hard to, I think, for people to express anymore, because they just keep coming, and I'm tired of having to explain to people like how it's supposed to be, And so we do have to figure out the right balance to do it, and it's going to be difficult in some of these places because they're all different in terms of what the community expects their access and their way of life and their standard of living to be, versus what we're going to just have to do in order to manage the people that come here. We cannot stop them from coming, and when it's a public area, we cannot prevent them from going. So we have to figure out different systems, and they're going to have to be different depending on the place and what people are doing. And because it's here, and it's been here for years, and only now we're trying to figure it out, it makes it all the more difficult.
Yeah, here's something from
Well said.
Sorry. This is something from one of our audience members pointing out that Hanauma Bay has always had free access to cultural practitioners. So that plays into the case that we were talking about, the C.J. Richardson's case that really established this. So here's another question, sort of playing off what you said. In light of the TMT, what can or should we do to protect cultural resources, places in Kailua? How do we make sure the Kanaka Maoli voice is heard and Hawaiian people and culture can live and thrive in Kailua? And again, we'll start with Senator Thielen. Again, this was part of your job as DLNR chair. Well, should we ask Danny, what do you think?
Well, first I'll say this. Obviously, I have no Hawaiian cocoa in me, so I will just say that I don't believe that anyone without Hawaiian cocoa should be speaking on how a person of Hawaiian descent and ancestry should be able to practice. I think that should be up to that community, those families, those groups. I think it's irresponsible of us to try and turn residential communities, as Cynthia shouted out, into profit centers. I think that's irresponsible because we go right back down the path of illegal vacation rentals. We start to justify why we're doing what we're doing. I also sympathize with Kaneohe. I remember as a kid going to Maunawili Falls, and it was never a problem to walk into the people who live there. They would be like, come on in and shower the mud off your body. It's all good. But at a certain point, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5,000, you're over it. I loved going to Lanikai, and you quoted me on there. We've been trampled on. A lot of Hawaii has been trampled on. The culture, not just from a Hawaiian perspective, but the culture of what this place encompasses with all ethnicities and all religions and all people, and how we used to interact and communicate. The reason why my Kailua is so popular and why you're from Kaneohe is so popular is because we're all longing. Like deep down, we're hurting. And we just want this sense of community again. We want to feel like we're connected. So we connect through the internet in the middle of the night, at weird hours, like weirdos. We're a bunch of, I feel like a nerd saying I run a community page where thousands of people get together with me every day and we just talk about our feelings. It's so weird to say that. But, at the end of the day, I feel like I think the reason why we all resonate on my page is because we all feel similarly, and there is this core commonality, and that's why I'm here. I didn't want to come here just to speak. Yeah. I have no desire for that. I hope that we're all here really looking for solutions of how we can make this town better, this island better, the way we communicate better, and the way we interact with tourism I want people to come here and feel welcome, like they used to when it was like, hey man, where are you from? You're from Florida. And they're like, yeah. And I was like, oh, rad. What are you doing tonight? You want to come drink some beers with us, or come hang out? It used to be like that.
Yeah, you
and
mentioned
now
that,
it's like,
no,
I don't
not
have
so
time,
much.
Yeah.
So,
who does?
Terry.
I'm a proud descendant of farmers from Scandinavia, and I have the skin problems to prove it. And I've only lived here for 48 years. But in the circles that I run in other foundations that work around the world on environmental issues, we are desperate for answers of how to deal with the existential threat to our way of life of climate change. And a Lanikai resident, Chip Fletcher, is one of the leading voices of science here about that. And what folks are learning is that indigenous knowledge is, and always has been, essential for us to be able to address the problems that we have. We need to listen to the Kanaka Maoli. They have knowledge. And I'll just end with one story. We were planning, Nanette, we were talking about this earlier, when the Hokulea first sailed into Kailua in 2005 to honor the work that children were doing to try to address how to save Kailua Bay, protect Hamakua Marsh. There was a meeting, and most of us were also originally from the continent, and somehow the question came out of, how do you spell Kawainui? Is it one word or two words? And I said, well, let me ask Mapuana. And I said, so Mapu, what is it? And she said, it's one word. And then she paused and she said, no one ever asked us that before. And then she went on to say how her own halau had walked right into the edge of the marsh and actually danced away in a recognition of the importance of the place, a lot of the crazy ideas that had been brought to Harold Castle about what to do about that place and that wetland. So they're here. We have the knowledge right here, and we have the reopened lo'i and fish ponds and all kinds of wonderful aloha aina education efforts that are springing up all over the place. What we need is to make sure that nobody ever graduates again from any high school, public, private, independent, or charter, without a demonstrated Malama Aina mindset. It's no longer a nice thing to have, it's a have to have it.
Senator, any thoughts on perpetuating Native Hawaiian culture here on this part of the island?
I totally forgot what I was gonna say listening to your story about the folks dancing in the marsh. Okay, ask me again. He totally had me up.
The question was looking at jumping off from what's happening on Mauna Kea, and then saying, how do we ensure that Native Hawaiian culture can be perpetuated here on this part of the island, perpetuated, respected, all of that?
So I really do believe that a lot of it has to come from systems change. A lot of the ways that our state and county agencies operate, just in general, are antiquated. There was a piece of legislation a couple of years ago, as an example, and I've told people this, to omit the references to sugar in the state plan related to agriculture. And, we lost the last sugar plantation a couple of years ago, and sugar has not been a viable economic force, a major economic force in Hawaii for a couple of decades. And here we are, I think it was in 2017, we're arguing over whether we should take the references out of the statute. So part of, the how we adjust and adapt to climate change is one of the major things that I worry about when I get in my worry mode, because the problems we have coming that we need to solve are so big and strong and hard that it's easy to just focus on what's right in front of you. As a legislator, as a resident, as a parent, then to actually take a sustained amount of time and really think about the challenges that we're trying to face and what exactly we need to do about it. So now it came back to me. So this is why I think this is a healthy conversation. Is I've seen we're at the end of the day, this is just a lot of talk, right? And frankly, I have not been able to put forward a lot of real specific answers to all the questions that you folks all share. But I have seen how the community's desire for the legislature and for your government to address issues has moved the needle on things. And it's because I've seen it happen with homelessness. Now, we're not there yet, and we're not even close to fixing it. But when I first came into office in 2015, it was not an item on anyone's agenda at all. It's taken several years for us to get to the point where we are really having meaningful discussions about how to change the system to address that problem. And it happened because the community stood up and said, we need to put this on the top of the agenda. And it actually has happened. The systems have to change, and it's been slow, but I watched it happen during my time in office. And so the one that's been percolating ever since we adjourned actually has been tourism. It's not just this panel. I've been hearing it pretty steadily ever since we adjourned a couple of months ago. I hear it from the legislators on the neighbor islands. I hear it at the neighborhood boards. I hear it in the communities. And so this is going to percolate back up to the top. And that's really the only meaningful way we can come up with responsible ways to change the system to address it. It's not going to happen, I think as quickly as everybody wants, but it does make a difference when people start banging the drum on it. Luckily we do have a democracy that does listen. Doesn't listen as effectively as everybody wants it to, but we have changed as a body, and we have changed policy as a result of people's willingness to speak out and make sure that we're prioritizing the right things. Thanks.
Senator Thielen, you have something to add?
Yeah, I think on the, making sure that there's room for people to practice culture here, a lot of that goes back to the education and making sure that everybody understands, the importance of it, the history, the value. And I just wanted to give a shout out to Mapuana and Kihei de Silva. Jarrett and I go to a lot of May Day programs as part of our jobs, and unfortunately they happen to always be on the same, 1 or 2 Fridays at the end of May, so we're like driving around to, 10 different schools and trying to get into all the programs. And, some of the schools only hold May Day, especially like in the Hawaii Kai area, maybe every other year now, and other schools, it's like the kids are doing whatever music that's kind of trendy. Formerly Lanikai Elementary, my alma mater, now Ka'ohao, Mapuana and Kihei have done a program there for years, teaching the kids, and it is hands down the most awesome May Day program I have ever seen. The kids that are up there dancing, every background or whatever, they're mouthing the words to the songs. They know not only what the words are, they know what they all mean. It was those kids, when they heard that the developer came in and just called the place Lanikai, but the original name was Ka'ohao, said, well, that's not right. And they demanded that the school's name be changed because of this program. And so they've just done an awesome job, I think, in educating the next generation. And I just really want to applaud them for all of the time that they've given personally to do that, because it's just really been wonderful.
So we're running out of time, and there's a lot of great questions here. And
Speed round.
Yeah.
Let's go.
I want to ask Danny one question along these lines, and we're talking about Native Hawaiian culture performances. You're having, and this is something you might want to talk about, you're having a big event coming up, and I saw on your page that you posted something announcing it, and you got overnight 1,500 responses or something like that. Yeah. But what about bringing in some Native Hawaiian cultural practitioners?
It's already on the agenda.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So that'll be part of what you're doing. You want to tell a little bit about what you're doing and let people know?
I come from an events background. I throw the Pacific Ink and Art Expo that happens every year at Blaisdell. We're in our 8th year. Got letters of excellence from the state, recognizing what we do for not just tourism and the economy, but also for culture. So I'm traditionally tapped by my very close friend Keone Nunez, and so we make the center of our show all about culture, because that's where tattooing, cacao, tatau started, and then it goes from the Pico out to everything that's gone into that modern culture. So we've been doing that for 8 years. It's very successful, and I thought man, growing up in Kailua, like Kailua is missing and lacking some really good and high energy, high community-based events. And so my buddy Ben, who's also a Kailua boy, we were like, dude, let's throw an event in Kailua. Let's shut down a street. And so we looked at the street where Blockbuster used to be, and it was no dice. And so we went to Art Machado of Poly Lanes, and I'm all about Save Poly Lanes. I'm all about saving that building. I call it our Alamo because it is like the last, bastion. I look at it and it's like, oh. Yeah, well, without the death, right? But with just partying and having a good time. That kind of Alamo. Way to go, Laura. Jeez. God.
Senator Thielen said she hopes there's a better ending than the Alamo.
That's classic. So long story short, we went to Art first. And Art said, bro, I'd love to be a part of this. I did a bunch of stuff with Ho'olalea, and this would be amazing. And you guys are bringing this youthful energy. Let's do it. So I said, well, how are we going to do this, right? Because we need to speak to the landowners. And so he goes, well, I really don't talk to A and B. And I said, okay, well, I ain't scared, dude. So yeah, we reached out to A and B, and they said, if you can get Art to give you his parking lot, then we'll be okay with it. And I said, well, maybe you guys can talk too. It's not necessarily about being like, can I cuss? Yeah?
You can say
I want to be that
anything,
guy,
yes.
the only one. No, but it's not about being like, fuck you, A and B, and just like, we don't want to work with you. I was like, why don't we find a way to merge? And so A and B gave us the blessing. If Art gave us the blessing, Art gave us the blessing. And now on September 28th, we're doing this event. It's Fall into Kailua, and it's for the community. It's called Blocktoberfest because we're shutting down all of Hikili in the parking lot. And you're hearing it here first, but we got Kapena, we got the Vitals. We're gonna be bringing in hula. We're gonna bring in this group called Teva Kanui, which is an awesome performance group. They do Tahitian, a bunch of stuff.
Great.
And we will be seeking a halau. So if you are wanting to get involved, please get involved. It's a free event for the community. I'm the one, and Ben's on the hook financially for about $30,000 to throw this off. So hopefully we pull it off, but we just want you guys to come and enjoy it. And yeah.
Thanks so much. Yeah, thanks for that. And that's a good note. Hopefully everybody can get back together again, and we'll answer more questions. Any final notes, any final words from people? We only really have a couple of minutes, so maybe a speed round here. Any thoughts, Senator?
Thank you all for coming. It's an honor to represent such an active and engaged community.
Okay, I'm sorry, Danny, real quick.
Thank you guys for coming. Thank you. If you follow the page and you love it, thank you. If you follow the page and you don't love it, thank you for engaging and just creating a dialogue. I think that's what it's all about. I'd love to meet any of you that want to meet me. If you want to high five, if you want to sock me in the stomach, let's do it. I'll be around.
Senator, any final thoughts?
Yeah, thank you for having me. I love the windward side. There are still parts about Kailua. We haven't lost it all. Kailua is a beautiful place. It's a wonderful place to live and raise kids and have a family. And those are the parts of it that are worth fighting for, and that we can still protect and hang on to. And where I just feel really fortunate to be a part of it, to be able to serve this community, but also just to be able to be here, because it's an amazing place. That's part of why the whole world wants to come here, and we got to deal with all of that. But we really are lucky to live in Hawaii and lucky to be on this side. So thank you for having me.
Thank you.
We have a wonderful, thriving community, and it's evident tonight for sure. I would suggest that we all walk away from here trying to envision what the thriving economy of the future in Kailua is. What would it look like? What elements would it have? And then put that on My Kailua or share it on our Facebook page at the Harold Casler Foundation. And then let's meet at Kaohao School and tell the kids what we've been thinking about and ask them how they want to envision the future economy. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, and I want to thank you all for.